I know what you're thinking. This looks painfully like a video essay right now. And is that because I am creatively bankrupt, or is it because I'm making a point about the internet? You decide. No, never mind. No, don't decide. It's because I'm making a point about the internet. But don't go anywhere, because I want to show you something that I think will really help us understand the internet, but I have to start with a very obvious statement. I'm not actually here right now. Even if this were a live stream, I wouldn't really be here. I'm just an image. That might sound like I'm 14 and very deep, but just go with it for a second. This is kind of like my mask. Behind what you're looking at is some silly guy, but this isn't him. The way I present myself online might be a window into my authentic self, whatever that is, but it's never the whole person. And like I said, that's obvious. I only say this to point out that creators and audiences have a funny kind of relationship, huh? You respond to this image that I produce, and in response to that response, I move it here, or there, or here. And then I see how you react. Our eyes are never actually on each other. They're on this, an intermediary image. But I'm not the only one with a mask. You have one too. It likes and subscribes and comments and shares videos you find on your socials. Your internet presence is your mask, your image. And your mask talks to my mask, which talks to your mask, and back and forth and back and forth. It's like we're speaking to each other through puppetry. And that distance between us is weird, right? I mean, you could argue that this describes every form of human interaction. I mean, can you ever really know a person? Aren't we always wearing masks? But it's heightened on the internet. It feels like the space between us, along with the images of us that sit at its center, is part of the reason why the internet can be dangerous. Parasociality, cancel culture, discourse, misinformation, it all brings up interesting questions like, who's actually behind the mask? And does that even matter? Is the mask all there is? If we intuitively know that someone's presence on the internet can never be a full representation of themselves, then why is it so easy to compare our lives to an immaculate Instagram profile? To feel like someone's humanity is their comment history. To feel like a YouTube creator is your friend. And the process of us relating to each other on the internet is getting more and more complicated every day. So let me tell you about something you're not going to find on PhilosophyTube. Don't get me wrong, I really dig a lot of PhilosophyTube's videos, but you just don't hear that much about semiotics on our channel, and that's what drives the internet. So you know what an image is. You're staring at a guy appearing as one, showing you other ones. And images carry meaning. They signify something, and therefore create signs. The reason you can take one look at your screen right now and make some instant assumptions based on what you see is because certain aspects of it are culturally significant. Just the word significant, like the root of it is sign, as in signify. So signs are made of images, but other things too. Words, phrases, and actions, they also can make up a sign. The way I dress, the quality of the green screen in the background, the title of this video, the thumbnail, the phrases I use, the editing style, the lighting, the view count, the subscriber count, and on, all of these things signify. Different combinations of signs create meaning greater than the sum of its parts. You get a vibe, like the small channel vibe. Another way to put it, the signs are in exchange with each other and produce more meaning, or in my case, a representation of myself, my YouTube presence, which I'm in control of, right? Check it out, I record in Logic. So there are a lot of YouTubers and content creators who use their platform to comment on the strange nature of the internet and whatever's going on here between you and me. Common subjects for a deep dive are the algorithm, phone addiction, capital production, creator drama, parasociality, and generative AI. And we'll talk about AI in a bit, but I think the reason why all these subjects resonate is because they touch on a tension that's very hard to place, but is intensely felt when online. And I think it has to do with semiotics. The tension comes from the fact that even though we all want to believe that I'm in control of this image, this production that you see in front of you, I'm not fully. And neither are you. I mentioned before that I shift and mold and change my representation based on your reactions, but I do that based on other things too, like YouTube guidelines and the algorithm, which are things that incorporate and respond to other systems. Like government, terms and conditions have to follow the law. Or capitalism, the algorithm is designed to make money. Representations are commodified and become brands. Or the social norms intersect with everything and informs the previous two examples. So you and other systems produce this thing along with me. Then we all react to it, and back and forth and back and forth. It's like we all make something we're in service to. No singular person or entity involved is completely holding the reins. And that's a phenomenon I think is perfectly embodied by the apology video.
I never had any bad intentions. But I do feel like shit. The tax?
I don't think apology videos are always cynical. You can make an apology video and really mean it, but whether it's genuine or not, it's still a reaction to how people respond to this brand that has grown larger than yourself, representing you in a way you don't like, out of your control. Your mask, your image, your sign, your representation, your brand, this obelisk has changed. Harm can spread in either direction toward audience or creator. I mean, really, what's the difference? Marshall McLuhan has this quote. I'm gonna need you to remember this. Check it out. We become what we behold. We shape our tools, and thereafter, our tools shape us. You know, like the internet. So what are we being shaped into? Whatever it is, I mean, it seems like we're helpless to stop it. Can you ever put the genie back in the bottle? I mean, we're helplessly online, helplessly addicted to our phones, the representations of ourselves, the representations of other people. I mean, are we in control of these things, or do we just happen to produce them? Do they really control us? I mean, we create the signs, but their exchange with one another can escape our grasp and bring us to our knees. Now, here's another aspect to all of this. A Pixar or Disney character are cartoons that are meant to represent human beings, right? It's art. It's corporate art, but it's art. Whatever it is, it's certainly content. Real people do not look, move, or act this way. An intentionally heightened simulation of reality. I mean, no big deal. But because that simulation of reality has become culturally significant, and there's that word again, we imitate it.
Aw, my caterpillar never turned into a butterfly.
We become what we behold. We embody the simulation. We make the unreal real.
Hot dog, yum! By the way, guys, if we get to 400,000 likes, I'll leave, I promise. Pinky swear. And share the live, share my.
You ever hear that life imitates art? It's more like life imitates content. And then we make more content imitating life, and then life imitates that content, and back and forth, and we keep this positive feedback loop going, and we can't seem to stop. Maybe things have always been like this, but the birth of mass production kicked it into high gear for sure. Or maybe it was the birth of mass media, and the internet is certainly mass media incarnate. We might be engaged in becoming increasingly unmoored from reality, whatever that even is. And yet, we're drawn to the process. We want to put ourselves online. Why? Do you want to know why I decided to do this? Let's take the temperature down a little bit. That was pretty intense, huh? We're a society of images, cultishly enslaved to their powerful Lovecraftian thrall, etc., etc. By the way, this is Fred. Say hi, Fred. Fred says hi. Fred, kiss or slap. Look, I love the internet, and I love YouTube, but there is a sort of eldritch horror to this medium that we're on right now. And what I've hopefully made clear is that it's not just that between you and me right now, distorting our communication, our lines of code, a complex web of social signs and images, an algorithm designed to capture profit, and a platform architecture that enables addiction. It's that the internet seems like it's snowballing, hurtling towards some unholy singularity, and it feels like we are powerless to stop it, which is in itself a reflection of what many people see in the analog world, despite the fact that the world and the internet once held so much promise. So remember all that semiotics stuff, because it will come back later. I'm gonna land this plane eventually, but first, we need to talk about generative AI. So there's been a lot of fuss and a lot of content made about AI and the future that it represents. People are freaked out. Some people are freaked out because they've seen too many movies about sentient AIs that determine the best thing for humanity is to destroy us, which never made sense to me, because that's Moon Man logic.
That wizard came from the moon.
You, my dear informed viewer, already know this, but no, generative AI isn't even close to sentient, which in some ways makes it kind of scarier. There's no soul in there. Other fears are more grounded. Like, a lot of attention has been paid to the economic impacts of AI that are already starting to materialize around us. Many astute people point out that the issue here isn't so much the technology, but the fact that we live under a system that puts a very high price on literal survival, let alone happiness and fulfillment. And that is true. Capitalism indeed bad. But generative AI is a little different than just automating people out of jobs. When humans line up in a factory to do a single menial task over and over, or drive a truck between two white lines, we are simulating robots. But when robots make pictures, videos, music, and so on, it's machines simulating humans. Creativity is a fundamentally sentient thing. or at least we used to think it was. And to have those processes be usurped by something that isn't sentient, I mean, that is a little scary. One can easily follow a catastrophic line of thinking to a future when generative AI is so advanced that it'll be able to create content that will, to many, if not all, be indistinguishable from human-created content. If we as people are constantly relating to each other through a veil of signs and images and simulations, I mean, that might say a lot about the nature of mass media, production, history, and the internet. But whatever chasm of electrical impulses, cultural signifiers, parasociality, and capitalistic algorithms exist between you and me right now, we can still say it's human. The human is still involved. So what happens if all this complex sign exchange and image culture becomes colonized by automation, with the human element being increasingly reduced as the technology gets better and better and better? I mean, what does that do? AI does represent a threat, but it's a threat that most people misidentify. Art and human creativity is not under threat. It's something that can never be taken away. Many have pointed out before me that AI represents a new set of tools for artists to use in their creations that AI could never do on its own. And even if generative AI became so advanced as to be able to create content by itself that completely satisfies the human drive to consume art, it will never replace the human drive to create art. So we always will. By definition, something that isn't sentient can't be reflective or emotive. Maybe it can inspire those things in the viewer, but it can never come from that place. And that seems significant too. But our ability to make human content isn't the same thing as the proliferation of that content. It isn't the same thing as human relevance. Sure, we may desire to connect and communicate and therefore create content and art for each other and ourselves, but that's getting harder and harder to do, even in the analog world. Actually, especially in the analog world. People are alienated and atomized with a lack of third spaces, living in car-dependent sprawl or hostile urban architecture, or suffering unlivable conditions. Both the time and literal space for our liveliness, our creativity, our connection, our expression is dwindling under the weight of our current systems, under the weight of our physical and digital architecture, and that's been identified as the case since the early 1960s. Throughout the latter half of the 20th century, philosophers like Marshall McLuhan, Guy Debord, Francis Foucault, Deleuze and Guattari, and arguably Jean Baudrillard all attempt, in part, to speak to the phenomenon of growing social and physical alienation under capitalist and or authoritarian systems. They do this in very different ways and come to different conclusions, but lack of access to human enrichment, alternative modes of social organization, and emancipation is generally kind of approached as a given. You can check the quotes.
On your mark, get set. We're riding on the internet, cyberspace, set free. Hello, virtual reality.
Interactive appetite, searching for a website, a window to the world, got to get online.
Take a spin, now you're in with the techno set. You're going surfing on the internet.
Having the internet in our home has had a great impact on our lives. Rich keeps up with the stock market and our investments, and I'm able to pay the bills in half the time it used to take me. And the kids are improving in their grades and communication skills.
Which makes me happy, as I would sure like them to go to college someday.
So when the internet came along, basically in the 1990s, it carried with it so much promise. Here was a new space. Not a physical space, but that didn't matter. Writing letters to each other went from a quaint, retro thing to do to the dominant mode of communication for young people. First with email, then with instant messenger. And things just sort of opened up from there. GeoCities, LiveJournal, MySpace. It suddenly became clear that the internet was a way to cross the physical barriers that had been intentionally placed between people. Not just through raw communication, which was already being done by the telephone, but through self-expression. Make your own website, your own profile, find a whole chat room or message board full of strangers, write a blog, make a video series, upload your songs, learn to code, program your own game, find a website, reach the masses. As early as 2002, StumbleUpon was founded, and it made something incredibly clear. The internet was functionally infinite.
Dude, I'm so bored.
Dude, you should definitely stumble.
Wait, what?
Many political activists and artists at the time recognized the radical potential that came along with this. And sure, almost immediately there were pop-ups and ads and things like that, but the early days of the internet still felt like it belonged to people, not to corporations. It was more protocol and less platform. But things wouldn't always stay that way. All it took was time. Now the internet's been colonized. And when people talk about the colonization of the internet, they usually talk about the algorithm, attention economy, and data capture. But why are all those things possible? One way to look at it is with the rise of the platform. You're on Vimeo right now. If you upload a video, it's in Vimeo's hands, subject to Vimeo's algorithms and Vimeo's terms and conditions. The video doesn't appear anywhere else on the internet, so they can do what they want with it. Vimeo is a walled garden. But what if when you uploaded something, it was just on the internet, like generally speaking, and YouTube was just one program or interface that allowed you to access it? And if you didn't like it, you could use something else. You could use a different portal with different search features and sorting functions or algorithms. You could create your own or add on to an existing one. In the early days of the internet, that's how things more or less worked. And there were problems with that system, but ultimately people had more control as compared to today. Now, platforms have sectioned off content, centralized it, and therefore put it in the hands of big corporations. There aren't videos that YouTube helps you see, there are YouTube videos that you can only see on YouTube. Vimeo. So just by creating this walled garden, platforms immediately have control over everything in it because they built the wall and they own the garden. Users produce the content, but we don't control it. That's up to the capitalists now. I mean, that is literally colonization. And things get even more complicated when platforms are swarmed with bots. Now, bad actors, people, governments, companies, can control information flow and the conversation. Algorithms, bots, ChatGPT, Midjourney, it's all AI. And it's taking over cultural production by blurring the lines of what is human and what isn't. Now that we're all trapped in these monolithic towers called platforms, overrun by bots, ruled by algorithms, suffering the onslaught of AI slop and sludge, it seems like on the internet, the human is slowly being excised from the production of signs, images, culture, and meaning. This absolutely bleeds into other areas of life. Because remember, we embody the simulation. I mean, how many times have we talked about living in a post-truth society? We don't experiment with the internet anymore. It's the other way around. So yes, art will never die, but that space that was once ours to control, the internet, might. Maybe it has already. Dead internet theory. It's a dead internet thing. We're talking about specifically the more like credible version of it. Like obviously the internet isn't dead. I'm here, you're here, we're both real, probably. The servers are running. So some proponents of dead internet theory think the internet dies, that this all ends with like a mass human exodus from the internet. We're all gonna stop logging on because there'll be no user-created content anymore.
And this is where the internet dies, by the way. When the internet becomes so bereft of user content caused by platforms attacking users and making posting content worse, that the internet must replace users with AI that is trained on a lack of user content and thus is just dumb and boring and generic. Why are people going to come online?
But I think that's silly. Because there will always be an explicit effort made by corporations and institutions to keep human engagement with the internet alive and well. Otherwise, there's no money in it. There'd be no population left to control. Advertisers will pull their ads because they can't verify their human reach, and like a billion other consequences that messes with the bottom line. Capitalists won't let that happen. Nah, the real death of the internet is the death of our control over it and the relevancy of what humans produce on it. It becomes a question of, how do we get our power back? And isn't that the same question a lot of us are asking ourselves offline as well? Seems like an important question, so let's try to answer it. So I asked earlier, what happens when you take human beings out of social and cultural production? Well, if we go back to the example of AI art, it seems to have two options. Either section off the information it's gathering from the internet before AI was created and AI art was being shared, or not, and gather AI art as part of its dataset as well, functionally learning from itself and other AI.
When AI models are trained on other AI outputs, they become inbred, they get weird, their eyes go a bit too far apart, they don't look so right, they don't sound or look good.
In either case, art stagnates and the human is cut out. The philosopher Jean Baudrillard, the inspiration behind much of this video, basically said this is what the world is now and always has been.
I'm gonna show you some magic. It's the real thing. I mean, it's all the real
That at the very least, capitalism and every system created and operating within it, which is everything, basically self-automates toward entropy. It takes the complex sign exchange of language, commodifies those signs, mass produces them, and then creates a positive feedback loop of cultural, political, and economic expression that ossifies history, keeps us stuck in place as everything else breaks down. All political struggles, art, and cultural expressions are just simulations of what came before, which is why capitalistic recuperation is so easy and so quick. It's how all critiques of capital are subsumed by it, why you can watch TV about how capitalism is so bad and nothing changes.
Are you trying to fake me out?
Paying attention is mandatory.
Oh, man.
The games will now begin.
It's a child's game.
It does this because it needs things to colonize. Land, culture, language, our attention, our imagination, the internet, literal outer space.
With 4 simple words that have been whispered by the intrepid since the time of the Romans. Fortune favors the brave.
Capitalism is its own AI that no longer needs human prompting. It's the automated machine of machines. It creates a singularity of such incredible density of information, profit, and expansion that nothing can escape its gravitational pull. And Baudrillard basically said there's no way to stop it. We've crossed the event horizon long ago. Check it out, look.
It is useless to dream of revolution through content. Useless to dream of a revelation through form. Because the medium and the real are now in a single nebula, whose truth is indecipherable.
And he said that before the internet. So it's just entropy is entropy, baby. All we can do is ride the wave. The internet will die, is dead, because the internet is nothing more than a simulation of reality, just one that runs its course faster than our own. When we stare into the internet, we are watching a microcosm of our own demise, like looking into a crystal ball. It's a seductive way of thinking because there's a certain truth to it, you know, kind of like depression. Sorry guys, we're gonna have to get like a little bit sadder before we come out on the other side of this video essay. So if you are one of the unfortunate souls out there looking for solutions, you are sentient in the year of our Lord 2024. Life is beautiful and the world is undeniably cruel. I got a tax refund this year, so that's kind of cool. It means I paid up front, like kind of like loaned the government money to fund a genocide. What I'm struggling with is to find a good transition to my next point about solutions and change, and no matter how justifiable it might be to feel depression in the face of external cruelties, it leads you down a mental road where there are no transitions, no solutions, only escape. A lot of people want change, but I think even more people want escape. And that's not because they're stupid, and that's not because they're selfish, it's because they are very understandably horrified and sad. I think you should always be suspicious of something that shares too much in common with the logic of depression. Is there a way of saying yes to some of these incredibly fatalistic observations in order to move through them, find new solutions, affirm our existence, make a better world? Baudrillard says that anyone looking for hope or revolution is just looking for God. But it sounds like he too has constructed his own God, just a Lovecraftian one that doesn't care about us. And I think there's a truth to that, but I'm skeptical. I'm a huge fan of philosophy and theory, but there is an enormous danger of turning it into scripture. Take what's useful and leave the rest. Be fluid. Because while I think it is a necessary component of creating alternatives, theory will never be able to perfectly map out uncharted territory. Fatalism is like a perfect tautology. If you haven't succeeded yet, then everything short of that success is a failure, and so reinforces your worldview. You point to all the failures and say, see? Is hopeless. Then you can relieve yourself of the burden of trying and caring by saying, let's just ride this crashing wave toward the end of things. Except then you remember you have no savings, no 401k, $300 in your checking account, and you realize this shit won't be like surfing. It'll be like drowning. So what do we do though? About the internet, about AI and human relevance, about the shitty world? I mean, the honest answer is I don't know exactly. And I don't think any book or theorist does either. But I do believe in a direction. I mean, I'm just some silly guy behind a mask, but whatever the answer is, if there is an answer at all, I think it has to start with creativity. Make stuff. make stuff. Do not spend your whole life not making things if you can help it. It doesn't matter if you're not good at it at first. It doesn't matter if you never get good. It just matters that you make things with intention and put it out there. Show it to people. Build things, code things, garden, make games, make space for yourself and others, gather offline, and yes, continue to make art. It's not a guarantee for us, and it's definitely not the whole picture. But we made these tools that shape us. We can at least try to make new ones, and maybe they'll enthrall us too, or blow us all up, but at least we tried. I'd rather be naive than inert. Marshall McLuhan also said that those who view education and entertainment as separate things don't understand anything about either. So sit in the tension of the internet and the space between us. I think there's a real place for art and even content. Because remember, whenever we make something, we become what we behold.